Do you have the Kevin Warren quotes? Now, I hope these look okay because I know they were pretty long. So after the game that night, and this is his job, just like it's the job of the Pat Kliavkoff to help do whatever he can with his conference when it comes to their future and whatever. So he was asked about if Ohio State should be a part of the college football playoff, even fresh off getting busted up in the second half by Michigan. One quote. It was an instant classic.
Not to people in Columbus.
Yeah, for real. I mean,
that's I'm pretty sure that they would rather watch their colonoscopy videos in that second half.
Yeah,
it was
not an instant classic. It was for Michigan football forever. It should be, but not. It was.
That was not a classic.
I watched the game because I was sitting there going, damn, Michigan is beating up the bully.
Look,
and they've become the bully.
South Carolina Clemson is a classic. I mean, especially for South Carolina. It's not for Clemson, but it was 31-30. It was, it came down to the wire. South Carolina.
They were TCU the week before.
That's a classic. Yeah. One-score games, not Michigan absolutely turning into actual Wolverines and ripping them to shreds.
All right, so that's
the second
one
half.
quote. All right. Without a doubt, on the Big Ten should end up with 2 teams in the college football playoff. Now, I understand he's doing his job.
Yeah.
And there might still be 2 because we don't know what's going to happen this weekend. Okay, that's fine. But the instant classic was just 100% clearly Michigan and Ohio State are 2 of the best 4 teams in the country. That's arguable, but how can you say that? Again, this is job. After they just got bloodied by Michigan.
I would make the argument that they're 2 of the best 6 teams in the country.
Okay.
Or 2 of the best 5, but 2 of the best 4 right now. Look, Ohio State, and it is not their fault that their schedule turned out the way it is, the way it did. But they played 2, really good teams this year. And one of them was, I guess Penn State's in there too, right?
Notre Dame, Penn State, Michigan.
Notre Dame, so they played 3.
It's pretty good.
And, the best one they played beat them badly. They had a hard time early on with Notre Dame. So, are they better than anybody else in that? I think there's arguments that can be made. So I don't think it's without a doubt. But again, this is his job to try to get him in.
Yeah, like that's the problem I'm having with this. Like I get we can break through his quotes and everything. Like I don't agree it was an instant classic, but I mean the man's just doing what he's paid to do. He's paid to be a shill for the conference, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I probably should have used a different word. Because I don't mean it disrespectfully. He's just doing what he's supposed to do. So I don't really, even if he's totally off base with what he's saying, that's just what he has to do.
He's doing it for his constituents.
I mean, I appreciate that he put up this fight, 2 of the best teams in the country and all that. I mean, I'll still, hold it against Bob Bowlesby for 2014 and the fact that he just backed off and wouldn't do anything. Kevin Warren's fighting for his conference, and I know that Bowlesby was trying to somehow magically get 2 small private Texas schools into the playoffs somehow or another, I guess was his end goal. But they got none ultimately. So
the last quote, great football game, epic football game. Again, that's very close to saying it was an instant classic. It was a hell of a game. I did not stop watching it because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And why not? Because Michigan did the same thing basically last year.
Well, who's going to tell me he's wrong when they got nearly 20 million viewers tuning into it, it wasn't the most competitive game, but it was a great, college football atmosphere and game and reaction and pageantry and all of those things. And plus, were they catching him walking off the field asking these questions too in the heat of that? So
may have been later on.
I don't really blame him for that. I don't agree though that those are 2 of the best 4 teams in the country. I do not agree with that.
No, look, Michigan knocked the just for men out of Ryan Day's beard.
Yeah.
And it was just that bad of a second half for them. It's the second year in a row they've done it. So, classic, I don't know. I mean, it was, again, if you're a Michigan fan.
It was not an instant classic.
No. If you're a Michigan fan, you're going to look back over the last 2 years and feel this great catharsis of, a decade and a half of total futility gone.
Let me tell you what that game reminded me of in the second half. And it's not the same, but it reminded me of 2001 when Colorado battered Nebraska 62-36. Now, that sent Nebraska into 2 decades spin. It's not going to do that to Ohio State. They might even be in the playoff, and who knows once they get back in the playoffs if they get that opportunity again. But it was very similar to the way the second half went, where you saw a very impressive, powerful alpha getting just bloodied by somebody else. Now, the Nick Saban quotes. This is after what for them was they looked kind of like themselves against Auburn, who ended up being obviously a 5-win team or whatever they were. On the college football playoff chances, I don't make those decisions, but I know what a resilient football team this has been. All right. We've lost 2 games to top 10 opponents, both on the last play of the game and both on the road. Truth?
Yes.
We're a good football team, and hopefully people will recognize that and will get a chance to play in the playoffs. He's not begging anybody. He's making some points. He knows that it's out of his control, which it's never been since since the playoffs started when he's at Alabama.
Yeah, but, I do think that something has to be said for teams that have 2 losses and don't play in the conference title game. Now, if you have 1 loss and don't play in the conference title game, or that loss happens to be in the conference title game, there's more precedent for that. But if you have 2 losses, not in the conference title game, I think there has to be, even for holy Alabama, there has to be some sort of punishment for that. There has to be, they can't just keep getting mulligans because the TV ratings are good, or because, they have better players than most people. Well, yeah, but those better players didn't have the better record. So something has to happen. I mean, just ethically, it seems like they should do that.
So how do y'all feel about the fact that they'll be in a future playoff?
I mean, it's 12 teams. That's fine to me, because you're going to have multiple teams like that. But if you're talking about the 4 teams that have earned it, like we're trying to, thread a needle here, and you would not make that excuse again if most of the other teams behind Alabama, Oregon. If Oregon tried to make that argument,
they get the benefit of the doubt. Let's just say they get the Alabama bump because they're Alabama and it's Alabama. And so they can have 2 losses and have this argument because, granted, the games, we're close and whatnot, but, other schools with 2 losses, we would have already ruled it out and would never even have posted their quote about it from their head coach.
No question. Yeah. No, and I don't know, is there anything that can happen this weekend? We know Ohio State will be number 5 tomorrow, most likely. Is there anything that can happen this weekend that Alabama can get in? Because with LSU losing, is it
12?
No, I'm talking about this year. I'm talking about
the title
Alabama being in the semifinals if something bizarre happens this weekend.
Yeah, TCU loses in the Big 12 title game. That's a step. USC loses in the Pac-12 title game. That's another step.
If both lose, I can see it happening.
Yeah.
I can see it.
Yes, that's how it would happen.
I asked you this earlier. If TCU loses to Kansas State, and it's a damn good 30-27 whatever game, if they do, and man, TCU just beating people up right now. Although, again, against Baylor, they needed something to happen, and they won that defensive struggle in Austin. If they were a part of the Big Ten or the SEC, would there even be a concern about whether they lost this weekend to a team that's going to be in the top 10 in the college football standings?
I think that there would be a different conversation. At this point, I'm just sort of used to this whole thing. So, I don't want to be defeated and just let them have their way, but they're going to anyways. And they being the college football overseers and decision makers and the loudest voices on televisions. There would be a totally different debate. It would, question everything from their game control to their strength of schedule and all of that because of the league they play in. And it's just always interesting to hear the number of people that talk about said league that clearly don't watch said league. I think that it's abundantly clear when talking about TCU for some people on television that they're just learning about the Frogs. And look, I don't pretend to know everything about everybody, but they've been undefeated all year, and I still feel like they're not getting much respect at all from a lot of the people who are supposed to have the respected voices. So that is what it is. But yeah, no, definitely. If they lose, they're done. They're not in the playoff, in my opinion. I don't think they're in the playoff if they lose this weekend, despite all that they have done. So on the other hand, for the argument of you don't need an expanded playoff because Alabama wouldn't get in like they don't deserve to this year. But on the other hand, TCU loses 1 game to a team they've already beat at the end of the year. And who knows, that could be by 1 point, and that's enough to eliminate them from the conversation. But the team that lost a couple games now gets back into it because they just lost earlier.
Yep.
How does the whole they lost earlier so they get a better shot? I think that's BS. It was like the whole let's hold Oregon out. Okay, if you want to hold Oregon out because they got destroyed by Georgia, that's one thing. Like, you got blown out, even if it is to the best team walking this earth. But it happened in week 1. Like, are we holding that against them the rest of the season? I just think that is absurd. In the old way of doing college football, and you only had 2 teams, whether it was the BCS or the polls, okay, there's only 2. But this whole thing of, like, you lost in week 1, now you're basically done. I just think that's teams get better along the way, and I don't think that the current system really rewarded that all that much. It was about where you started in the polls and how you hung on to that. And then we see how the polls get massaged every week with the number of top 25 wins and who sneaks into the bottom to prop this team up and do all of that. So I think it's kind of silly that we're even having this debate. But yeah, I think if TCU loses this weekend, they're done. Whether they deserve to be or not, I think that's probably the way that it goes, because I think people have just been waiting for that one spot on their record that they can go, all right, see, told you, they're frauds. They don't deserve a shot at it. That's how I feel.
All right, we'll see. The release of the standings come out tomorrow. There'll be a little bit of change because of the LSU loss. And Tennessee, they'll be at least in the mix, although there's another team that, because of the loss to South Carolina, you wonder what happens with them. So a lot to get to. Your feedback, we appreciate a lot of you. Kids